My name is Claire, and last month I buried my only child. Ethan was 8. He loved stars, pancakes, and believing people were good. I used to believe that too, until the day of his funeral when my family showed me how wrong I was. The church smelled of lilies and rain. I remember clutching the small photo of Ethan in my hands, my fingers trembling against the glass. His smile, bright and full of life, mocked the silence around me. But the silence didn't last. It shattered the moment my sister, Monica, laughed. At first, I thought it was grief, nervous laughter, maybe. But then came the clinking of glasses, the sound of music from someone's phone, the hum of conversation. My family wasn't mourning. They were partying. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in disbelief. My mother was chatting with cousins I hadn't seen in years, smiling, as if we were at a wedding. Monica was showing someone a new designer bag, her voice loud, careless. Even my brother-in-law, Jason, had a drink in his hand, joking about how at least the weather's nice for once. I couldn't breathe. Every laugh felt like a knife twisting in my chest. My little boy's coffin sat just a few feet away, covered in white roses, while they took selfies beside it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the music from their phones and ask if they'd forgotten what we were here for. But the words stuck in my throat. My grief was too heavy to carry and too fragile to throw. I caught Monica's eye for a moment. She didn't flinch. She gave me that same smile she used to give when she won, when she got what she wanted, and I didn't. "You need to relax, Claire," she whispered, brushing past me. "You're making people uncomfortable." Uncomfortable? That word echoed in my head. They were uncomfortable because I was mourning my child. I stepped outside into the drizzle, the cold air biting against my skin. My vision blurred as tears mixed with rain. I thought of Ethan's laugh, his small hand squeezing mine the last night in the hospital. He had trusted me to protect him from everything cruel in this world. I had until now. Inside, the music got louder. My mother's voice drifted through the doorway. At least now she has that trust fund. She won't have to struggle anymore. That's when I froze. The trust fund. Ethan's trust fund. Money from his father's life insurance, set aside for his future, his education, his dreams. My mother said it like it was a lottery win. I went back inside, trembling. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice quiet but sharp. She blinked at me innocently. "Sweetheart, it's just, well, you don't need all that money now. Ethan's gone. Maybe you can use it to help the family. We've been through a lot too, you know." I felt the air leave my lungs. Help the family? The family that treated my son's funeral like a social event? Monica chimed in, swirling her drink. "You've been struggling for years, Claire. We helped when we could. Maybe it's time you return the favor." I stared at them, each word burning hotter than the last. That money was for Ethan, for his life. Jason laughed softly. "Well, he doesn't need it anymore, does he?" The world went silent. My hands shook so hard I had to clutch the edge of a chair. My grief turned into something darker, something sharp. I saw them not as family, but as vultures circling what was left of me. That night, I sat alone in Ethan's empty room. His toys were still scattered across the floor, his drawings taped to the wall. I touched one, a messy picture of us holding hands beneath a crooked sun, and felt something inside me break. I whispered to the darkness, "They partied while I buried you, baby." They smiled while I shattered. I closed my eyes and made a promise. Not out of rage, but justice. "They will never touch what belongs to you. I'll make sure of it." The next morning they came knocking, all smiles and fake sympathy, holding coffee and paperwork. Monica placed a folder on the table. "We just need you to sign a few things," she said sweetly. "It'll make handling the trust easier for everyone." Everyone. They said that word as if Ethan was just an inconvenience in their way. I didn't say a word. I watched their eyes, calculating, greedy. I smiled for the first time in days, cold, small, but enough to make Monica pause. "You'll get what you deserve," I said softly. She tilted her head. "What's that supposed to mean?" I turned away. "It means you should be careful what you ask for." They laughed, thinking it was another sign of my grief, Another sign I was too broken to think clearly. But inside, I was no longer broken. I was awake. That day, I buried my child. But soon, I would bury their lies. And when I did, they'd never see it coming. Before everything collapsed, my life was small but full of meaning. My name is Claire Mitchell, 32, single mother, and the kind of woman who built her world on quiet sacrifices no one noticed. I wasn't rich or powerful, but I had something priceless: my son, Ethan. Ethan came into my life when I needed saving the most. His father, Daniel, was my anchor, calm, patient, and too good for the noisy chaos of my family. When he died in a car accident, Ethan was only 4. I remember holding him that night, whispering that we'd be okay, even though I didn't believe it myself. After Daniel's death, my family swooped in, not to comfort me, but to advise me. My mother, a woman who could turn empathy into judgment, said, "You can't raise a child alone, Claire. Move back home." My sister Monica chimed in, smiling that sweet, venomous smile. "At least you'll have people around who know better." I didn't move back. I couldn't. I had spent my whole life under their shadow, being told I was too emotional, too naive, too weak. So, I stayed in our small apartment and built a life out of the pieces Daniel left behind. I worked nights at a diner, studied during the day to become a medical assistant, and saved every dollar I could for Ethan's future. Every week, Ethan and I had traditions: Saturday pancakes, bedtime stargazing, and the wish jar, where we'd write little dreams on scraps of paper and drop them in an old mason jar. His were simple: go to space, buy a puppy, make mommy smile. For a while, I thought that love would be enough. But then came the cough, the fever that wouldn't break, the hospital visits that stretched into months. Ethan was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder. I still remember the doctor's voice, calm but distant, explaining terms I didn't understand: treatments, expenses, long-term care. All I heard was the word chronic. My first instinct was to call my family. Maybe this time, they'd show up. Maybe love would outweigh pride. But when I asked for help, their sympathy came wrapped in disappointment. "Claire, you should have thought ahead," my mother said coldly. "If Daniel had taken better care of his finances, you wouldn't be in this mess." Monica laughed lightly. "You can't expect us to pay for every bad decision you've made. Maybe if you hadn't quit your nursing program." I hung up that night and cried until morning. Not because I was surprised, but because part of me still believed they'd care. But I didn't stop fighting. I took extra shifts. I sold my car. I learned to sleep sitting up in hospital chairs. Ethan, even when hooked to machines, would smile and say, "It's okay, Mommy. We're still a team." There were nights I thought I'd break, when bills piled up and exhaustion blurred my vision. But then I'd see his drawings taped to the wall: rockets, stars, and 2 stick figures holding hands. One labeled Ethan, the other Mom. The hospital became our second home. The nurses knew us by name. Ethan called one of them Captain Lisa because she'd always salute him before giving him medicine. And when things got hard, I'd sit by his bed and tell him stories about Daniel, how he once painted our bedroom yellow because he thought the color would trap the sunlight. It was during one of those long nights that I remembered Daniel's insurance policy, something he'd set up when Ethan was a baby. He'd told me, "If anything ever happens to me, this is for him, not for anyone else." I never thought I'd have to use it. But that money became Ethan's safety net, his trust fund, and I swore I'd protect it. When Ethan's condition stabilized, I reached out to my family again, not for help, but for peace. I thought maybe they'd want to see him. I wanted to believe blood still meant something. They visited once. Monica brought a bouquet and spent most of the visit scrolling through her phone. Jason, her husband, complained about hospital parking fees. My mother said Ethan looked better than expected, as if he were an exam she'd graded. Ethan tried to make them laugh. He asked Monica if she'd help him name the stars he could see from his window. She smiled politely and said, "Sweetheart, stars aren't really that interesting." I saw his little shoulders slump, and my heart cracked. After they left, Ethan said softly, They don't like me much, do they? I lied. They're just tired, baby. They love you in their own way. But even then, something inside me knew the truth. My family didn't love, they owned. And anything they couldn't control, they ignored. Years passed like that, a cycle of hospital rooms and small victories. When Ethan turned 8, he wanted a telescope. I saved for months and finally surprised him with one. We spent nights on the balcony, tracing constellations and whispering our wishes into the sky. He'd point up and say, "That's where Daddy lives now." And I'd nod, holding back tears. But then, things took a turn. The doctors said his condition was worsening. Stronger medication, more tests, more bills. I drained every account I had. I even thought about using the trust fund, but something stopped me. Daniel's voice echoed in my memory. It's for his future. And I held on to that. When the end came, it was peaceful. Ethan smiled one last time and said, "You kept every promise, Mommy." But I hadn't. I didn't save him. I didn't protect him from the world, or from the people waiting to devour what he left behind. Because in the weeks that followed, my family resurfaced, suddenly caring, suddenly involved. They sent messages about handling the paperwork, about making sure Ethan's trust doesn't go to waste. I thought they were finally trying to help. I was wrong. Their sympathy wasn't love, it was calculation. Every text, every visit, every tear was rehearsed. I didn't know it yet, but they weren't mourning Ethan. They were preparing to strip away the last piece of him I had left. The family that once turned their backs on us was about to betray me in ways I never thought possible. And when they did, I would make sure they regretted it. It started with a phone call. 3 days after Ethan's funeral, I was still sitting on his bed, clutching one of his toy cars like it was the only thing tethering me to Earth. The world outside kept moving, cars passing, people laughing, but inside that room, time had stopped. Then the phone rang. It was my mother. Her tone was soft, almost too soft. "Claire, honey," she began, drawing out the words like syrup. "We've been talking, me, Monica, and Jason. We think it's time to have a family meeting." I froze. About what? There was a pause. Then she sighed, like I was being difficult. "About Ethan's trust fund, dear. You know how to handle it now that—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. My throat tightened. "Now that he's gone," I whispered. "Yes," she said gently. "I know this is hard, but you can't just sit in that apartment forever. You need to think about your future. Our future." Our. That word rang like a bell of warning. Still, I went. Maybe some part of me still hoped I was wrong, that grief had twisted my view of them, that they'd show me some human decency after everything. The next morning, I arrived at my mother's house. The same house I'd grown up in, where I'd once been told to lower my voice, hide my tears, and act grateful for what you're given. It smelled the same, expensive perfume masking something rotten underneath. They were waiting in the dining room. My mother sat at the head of the table, Monica beside her, Jason leaning casually in his chair like he owned the place. Papers were spread out before them. I hadn't even sat down when Monica smiled and said, "You look better. Color's coming back to your face." "I didn't come here for compliments," I said quietly. Jason chuckled. Always so defensive. My mother placed a manicured hand on the table. "We just want what's best for everyone, Claire. You've been through so much. Handling the finances alone, it's too much for one person." "I've managed for years," I said. "And that money is for Ethan, for what he would have wanted." Monica leaned forward, feigning sympathy. "Exactly. And Ethan loved family, didn't he? He'd want the money to help all of us, not just sit there doing nothing." I felt my chest tighten. Sit there doing nothing? That trust fund was meant for his future, Monica. It's all that's left of him. Jason scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. You can't keep living in the past. Think of this as spreading Ethan's light." "Spreading it how?" "By dividing his money like a prize." My mother sighed, as if I were a stubborn child. "It's not about the money, Claire. It's about healing. We've all lost him. You're not the only one grieving." Something inside me snapped. You partied at his funeral, I hissed. You laughed while I buried my son. The room went silent. For a moment no one moved. Then Monica looked away, her smirk faltering. My mother's eyes hardened. You're imagining things, she said coldly. People grieve differently. Is that what you call it? I whispered. Grieving. Jason shifted in his chair, muttering under his breath. Here we go again. I stood up, my hands trembling. You can keep your sympathy. And you can forget about that money. It's not yours. Monica's voice cut through the air like glass. Oh, Claire, you really think you can handle it alone? You can barely keep your job, your emotions, or your sanity in check. I froze. Her eyes met mine, sharp, deliberate. You're spiraling, she continued. Everyone can see it. You're not well. Maybe that's why Mom's so worried. My mother nodded, playing the concerned matriarch. We just want to help, sweetheart. You've been under so much strain. It might be safer if someone else, someone more stable, handled the finances. The words hit like a slap. Someone more stable. It wasn't concern. It was strategy. I turned to leave, but Monica's voice followed me like poison. You can walk away, Claire, but we'll get that trust released. It's only a matter of time. You're not the only Mitchell with a claim. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My pulse roared in my ears as I stumbled out into the cold air, every step heavier than the last. That night, I couldn't sleep. Their words replayed over and over. The fake sympathy, the hidden barbs. You're not well. You can't handle it. He'd want to help us. I saw Ethan's face in my mind, his small hands cupping my cheeks, whispering, Don't let them make you sad, Mommy. I promised him once I'd never let the world take what was his. And now my own family was trying to do just that. I had to know how far they'd go. The next day, I went back, not to confront them, but to listen. They didn't know I still had a key. Their voices drifted from the living room. I stayed in the hallway, hidden behind the wall. Monica's tone was sharp. She's not going to hand it over. You saw her. She's losing it. My mother replied, calm and cold. Then we'll make sure the court sees that too. If we can prove she's not mentally fit, the trust fund can be transferred to family guardianship. Jason laughed. You mean to us? My breath caught in my throat. Exactly, my mother said smoothly. We'll file a concern report. Emotional instability, erratic behavior, signs of breakdown. It won't be hard to convince a judge. She's barely functioning. Monica sounded almost amused. And when the money's released, we'll each get our share. Finally, something good out of all this misery. Jason snorted. About time Claire's bad luck worked in our favor. I pressed a hand over my mouth to stop myself from making a sound. My vision blurred with tears. Not from sadness, but fury. They weren't just greedy. They were calculating. My mother had raised me to believe family meant loyalty, protection, love. And now, she was weaponizing those very words to destroy me. Monica's laughter echoed through the house. She'll never see it coming. She's too busy crying over that kid to notice what's happening. Something inside me shifted then, a slow, cold clarity. My grief hardened into resolve. I wiped my tears and stepped back from the wall, careful not to make a noise. I left the house quietly, but every step out the door felt like a declaration. They thought I was broken. They thought I'd fold under their lies. They had no idea what they'd just awakened. As I walked into the night, I looked up at the sky, the same one Ethan and I used to trace constellations in. For a moment, I imagined his voice again, soft and sure. You can do it, Mommy. Don't let them win. I whispered back, I won't. By the time I reached home, I already knew what I had to do. They wanted to play games with my sanity? Fine. I'd give them a show they'd never forget. But this time, I wouldn't be the one unraveling. They would. And when the truth finally came crashing down on them, it wouldn't just expose their greed, it would ruin them. I couldn't sleep. Nights stretched like empty roads, each one worse than the last. When I finally closed my eyes, my head filled with the worst kind of replay, Monica's laugh at the funeral, Jason's careless joke, Mom smiling like a queen at a feast. Their faces hovered over every memory of Ethan, like vultures circling warmth. At first the grief was a soft thing, a dull ache that sat in the hollow of my chest. I let it be patient with me, the way you let a storm pass over a field, knowing it will leave traces, but trusting the earth to recover. I cried until I had no sounds left, my pillow tasting like salt and the dawn finding me hollow. Friends called. I let the calls go to voicemail. I moved through the days like a ghost. But the grief shifted. It did not roar in one night. It thickened, warmed, and hardened into something with an edge. The more I remembered their laughter, the clink of glasses, the video someone had taken, the more an ember in my chest caught. It was the smallest thing at first, a tightened jaw, a fist that would not unclench. Then the ember fed on fuel, their thin smiles, the way they spoke about the trust fund like a pot they were owed. I thought of all the small refusals that had stacked over the years, birthdays they missed, help they refused, times they chose convenience over care. Those moments were not small anymore. They were bricks in a wall I had built, a wall that kept out their pity. Each memory sharpened the edge of my resolve. Sleeping less, I found hours in the night to plan with a nervous, bright focus. I would sit still and let the room breathe. Rain mapped slow patterns across the window, and for a moment I watched Ethan's photo, candlelight catching the corner of his smile, and felt both loss and a new kind of clarity. The reflection was not just memory. It was intent. My body betrayed me. I would wake at 2 a.m. with my heart racing, palms damp, convinced someone was at the door. Other nights, exhaustion soaked me, and I slept for 2 hours and woke with fragments running like film in my head. I kept a notebook at my bedside. At first it held doctor names and appointments. Then it collected facts, dates of their visits, phrases they had said, a list of what they owned and where money might be hidden. The more I wrote, the smaller my fear grew. The pen made details solid, made reality sensible. The notebook became armor, a ledger of wrongs and evidence. It became a map. People who watched me called it a long morning. No one asked how well I slept or what it cost me to make coffee in the morning. They nodded and moved on. But my silence was changing shape. Silence had been a shield at the funeral. Now it sharpened into a weapon. I learned to listen to cadence, to notice when fingers brushed a check too eagerly, to keep my face like a calm sea while my mind read the room. There were moments I wanted to explode. I imagined confronting them in the kitchen, slamming a plate down, naming every small cruelty they had dealt me over the years. I practiced the words and then stopped because spoken rage would give them the story they wanted. Claire, unstable. No, if I moved, it had to be with purpose. Every afternoon I stood by Ethan's window and watched the street below. Children ran and shouted. A man walked a dog. Life went on. I would look at the sky, the same one Ethan had loved, and feel a stubborn patience. I thought of the wish jar, tiny paper promises tucked away. I had promised him I would keep his dreams safe. That promise dug like a nail in my palm. The more they pushed, those phrases about helping the family and handling things for her, the clearer my work became. This was not only about money. It was about standing between Ethan and the people who would make his memory a currency. It was about proving that grief did not equal weakness and that love could be action as much as feeling. I learned to wear a face that betrayed nothing. At calls from Mom, I sounded composed. At meetings with lawyers, I was precise. At the funeral home, I nodded like a woman marking the steps in a script. But under it all, the air inside me was electric with intention. My grief was not a place to be pitted. It was a furnace where I forged plans. Some nights I remembered Daniel, the way he made pancakes and his patient laugh. Those memories were tools, reminders why I fought. Kindness had built me, greed had broken me. I kept the two close and let them guide every choice. By the 7th week, my hands did not tremble unlocking the filing cabinet. I did not choke when I said the word trust to the solicitor. I could look at their faces without flinching. My anger had a rhythm now, a steady drum that matched the steps I took when I left the house to gather information or wait outside a bank. It was not mindless fury, it was precision. I started to watch them like maps. I learned when Monica posted photos, what time Jason called, which friends would visit when they smelled opportunity. Social media became a ledger. Their smiles betrayed schedules. I saved screenshots and messages, things that felt petty, but mounted into proof. Every tiny pattern reduced the chaos in my head. Little by little, their indifference turned into a blueprint I could use. The last thing that steadied me was a quiet vow to the empty room. "You took my peace," I whispered. "I'll take your masks." I started small, like lighting a candle in a dark room, slow, deliberate, careful not to blow it out. The first thing I did was gather facts. Dates. Conversations. Who showed up when. The grief that had clouded me became a lens. Details sharpened into leads. Monica and Jason looked glossy on the outside, but gloss hides cracks. I found missed payments, an unpaid tax notice Monica ignored, and letters from stores demanding settlement. My notebook filled with odd transactions, prepaid leases, sudden withdrawals after family dinners, transfers that lined up with their boasts. Patterns emerged. Patterns became a map. I learned to listen for rhythm. I answered calls with a soft voice and let them reveal themselves. Monica bragged about an investment while I recorded. Mom left voicemails suggesting we share the funds. Their words piled up like evidence. Each recording, each screenshot, added weight. Mark reappeared like a lifeline. He found me in the hospital cafe, older but steady. He had been Ethan's godfather, and once something more. My family had pushed him away with gossip and judgment. He sat across from me and said, "Tell me everything," and I did. Mark spoke in practical terms. The trust was protected but vulnerable to guardianship claims based on mental fitness. They could try to transfer control if they convinced a court I was incapable. He taught me to be exact with language. Never say angry things on the record, he warned. Let them expose themselves. We set rules. Keep dated notes. Timestamp every recording. Save emails and social posts. Mark explained discovery and subpoenas, tools to pull their hidden records into the light. He warned that those moves would escalate the fight, but escalation would also force them to show their true selves. My plan became a weave of legal moves and quiet observation. I opened a lawyer-style email to request trust accounting. I filed a formal concern with the trustee. Each bureaucratic nudge forced their responses and revealed cracks in their story. I turned into a careful shadow. I recorded Monica at a cafe boasting about a share of the fund. I captured Jason's loud prediction at a bar. "We'll get that money." I saved voicemails where Mom rehearsed lines about my fragile state. My hands shook the first few times I hit record, but each file was proof that their smiles hid other intentions. Mark helped shape the narrative we needed, motive, method, and a timeline. Proof alone wouldn't be enough. Courts want context. We needed recorded planning, documents showing transfers after key dates, and witnesses who could place their behavior in a pattern. So we gathered both hard facts and human testimony. I spoke to nurses who had seen Monica's indifference, neighbors who noted late-night visitors, and a co-worker who witnessed Jason's expense claims. Mark coached witness questions so nothing we asked sounded like entrapment. We built credibility on the other side of their accusations. Public records became a friend. I pulled property filings and business registrations, matched payments to dates they'd boasted of fixing things, and discovered a shell company tied to a neighbor that matched suspicious transfers. Each public document stitched another part of the story. We set tactical traps. I would attend family gatherings looking fragile so they'd underestimate me and let them talk. Mark taught me how to phrase questions that would prompt explanations and confessions without tipping our hand. He arranged legal requests that made their responses part of the record. There were risky moments. Monica almost caught me recording in a diner. I pretended to search for an earring and left with a clip that mattered. Jason deleted a message, but forensic recovery brought it back. Each near miss sharpened my caution and taught me better ways to secure proof. Mark brought a junior associate to quietly handle subpoenas. They unearthed communications my family thought deleted, threads discussing arrangements and handles. We backed up everything in triplicate. Redundancy meant nothing could be dismissed as coincidence. There were nights when the work felt like desecration, sifting through the private mess of people who had once been family. But each discovery was a shield for Ethan's memory. Each recorded boast made their next move riskier. We also prepared for their likely attack, the unstable mother narrative. Mark lined up statements from therapists, supervisors, and neighbors to prove my competence. We documented my work history, my careful management of bills, and testimonies of my steadiness. We built a fortress of ordinary life against their accusations of breakdown. The plan was not clean. It was messy and human, part law, part patience, part raw grief turned into strategy. We did not seek to humiliate for pleasure. We sought to stop a theft. And there was a strange comfort in that clarity. Late nights, Mark and I assembled packets. He labeled exhibits. I dated envelopes. He kept his voice calm, and I followed his rhythm. In the quiet, I pictured a judge reading the timeline, laughter at a funeral, then a series of moves to profit. I imagined those facts standing upright in court. Some days I wanted to storm their house and tear off their masks. Instead, I recorded more. I let them speak. Their arrogance became the trap. When the first subpoenas went out, I felt a hush in my chest. It was the sound of the world tilting toward truth. They thought they had taken my son, my peace, and that paper would secure their gain. They thought they'd taken everything. They had no idea what was coming. The first sign came quietly. A message from Monica, short and sweet. We need to talk about your well-being. No context, no warmth, just those words that felt like a warning disguised as concern. I knew what it meant. They'd sensed movement, and now the game was changing. By then, Mark and I had already sent preliminary filings to secure the trust. We thought we were ahead, but my family had always known how to weaponize perception. They didn't need proof, just the right performance. It started with whispers. Neighbors began asking if I was doing okay. My mother called one evening, her voice trembling with false tenderness. "Claire, honey, everyone's worried. You haven't been sleeping, you've been acting strange." I wanted to scream. Strange? I was grieving. But she made grief sound like madness. Within days, a formal notice arrived. Petition for guardianship. They were claiming I was unfit to manage Ethan's trust, citing emotional instability and obsessive behavior related to unresolved trauma. They even listed paranoid surveillance as an example, referring to the recordings I'd made as evidence. I sat at my kitchen table, the notice trembling in my hands. I could almost hear them laughing again, the same echo from the funeral, looping inside my skull. Every insult they'd ever whispered now written in legal ink. My heart pounded, my throat burned. For a moment, I thought I'd lose control, but then I saw Ethan's photo on the fridge. His smile steadied me. I whispered, "Not this time." Mark arrived within the hour. He read the notice twice before speaking. "They're trying to corner you emotionally, make you lash out.
Don't give them that."
His calm made the storm inside me worse. "They're using my grief as a weapon, Mark." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why we stay strategic. We fight it with proof, not anger." Still, the walls were closing in. Monica appeared suddenly outside my workplace, pretending it was a coincidence. She smiled too wide. "You're scaring people, Claire. Everyone thinks you've lost it. Maybe it's time to let professionals handle things." Her words dripped with pity, but her eyes gleamed with victory. I turned away, silent. Silence, I'd learned, unsettled her more than shouting. Days blurred. Court documents piled up. My phone buzzed constantly, anonymous messages, gossip spreading online. Poor Claire, one post read, still talking to her dead kid's picture. The cruelty was relentless. Mark faced his own pressure. The law firm's partners called him into meetings, warning that conflict of interest could damage his career. He didn't say it, but I saw the fatigue in his eyes. The case was bleeding into his life. One night, he showed up late, tie loosened, voice rough. "They're digging into my past, Claire. Into us. They're trying to paint this as emotional manipulation. My stomach dropped. So, they want you gone. He hesitated. If I step back, it might take the heat off you. I shook my head. If you step back, they win. But even as I said it, I felt the fear settle in. What if they really succeeded? What if I lost everything Ethan's father had left, everything meant for our future?
Sleep deserted me.
I'd lie awake hearing their laughter, their plans whispered behind polite voices. The air in my apartment grew heavy with paranoia and dread. But beneath it all, a strange calm began to form, thin, fragile, but real. They could attack my reputation, twist my words, isolate me. But they couldn't erase truth. Not if I kept it safe. So I doubled down. I secured backups, encrypted drives, stored originals offsite. I prepared affidavits from doctors confirming I was of sound mind. Every step felt like moving through fog, but each piece of paper, each signature, pushed back against the lie. Then came the night that changed everything. It was nearly midnight when my phone buzzed, a blocked number. I hesitated before answering. A voice, low and nervous. I'm not supposed to be doing this, but you should check your email. Now. The call ended. No name, no trace. I opened my inbox. One new message. Subject line. She went too far this time. My pulse raced. Inside was a single PDF attachment. I clicked. It was an email thread between Monica and Jason, dated 2 weeks earlier. She'd forged a doctor's statement declaring me mentally compromised and fabricated supporting notes. The signature, the clinic letterhead, all falsified. At the bottom, Jason had replied, "Make sure Mom rehearses this version before court. We need it tight." My breath caught. Proof. Actual proof. The document glowed on the screen, the words surreal and electric. I reread it 3 times, my hands shaking harder each time. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Then the tremor stopped, and something colder took its place. Focus. I forwarded the file to Mark with one line. They just buried themselves. The walls that had been closing in suddenly stopped moving. They didn't know it yet, but the game had shifted. They thought they were tightening the noose around my neck, but I was the one holding the rope now. The morning of the hearing broke gray, and still, the kind of light that felt like judgment. Rain had washed the city clean overnight, leaving the courthouse steps slick and cold beneath my heels. I walked slowly, each step measured, each breath deliberate. For months, I had lived in shadows, collecting, preparing, waiting. Today, the waiting ended. I wore black, not out of mourning but memory. A quiet tribute to Ethan, my anchor, my reason, my silent witness. Around my neck, I carried his locket. In my hands, a single black folder. Inside it, everything. When I entered the courtroom, they were already there, my mother, Monica, Jason, sitting together like a polished lie. Monica's hair was perfect, her smile rehearsed. Jason leaned back, confidence oozing through a smug grin. My mother clutched her pearls, eyes glistening with counterfeit grief. For a fleeting moment, they looked like a family, my family, but I knew better. They weren't here to heal. They were here to take. Mark met my eyes from the front row. His nod was small but steady. "You've got this," he'd said earlier. I wasn't sure if he meant legally or spiritually, maybe both. The judge entered. The rustle of papers, the shuffle of chairs, all sounds sharpened by tension. My heart pounded, but my face was still. Silence became my armor. Their lawyer began, his voice smooth and sanctimonious. "Your Honor, this case is about compassion. The family merely wishes to ensure the trust is handled responsibly, given Mrs. Parker's deteriorating emotional state." I almost smiled.
Deteriorating.
They'd always use softer words to mask cruelty. The lawyer gestured toward me, painting a portrait of fragility, sleepless nights, erratic behavior, grief-induced instability. Behind him, Monica nodded solemnly, playing the concerned sister. When it was my turn, I stood. The air shifted, faint but real. I stepped forward, placed my folder on the table, and spoke clearly. "Your Honor, I appreciate the concern my family has expressed. But I believe the court should see the full picture before judging my capacity. The judge nodded. Proceed. I opened the folder. Page 1. Transcripts of recorded calls. Exhibit A, Mark announced. I pressed play on the small recorder. Monica's voice filled the courtroom, smug and laughing. She's too broken to fight us. Just let her think we're helping. The room fell silent. Monica's smile froze, eyes darting toward the lawyer. Jason stiffened. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came. I turned the page. Exhibit B, evidence of forged medical statements submitted as proof of my supposed instability. Mark handed over copies to the clerk. These were traced to my sister's laptop. The judge frowned, examining the signature. You're claiming this document is falsified? I'm not claiming, I said softly. I'm proving. Mark submitted an affidavit from the clinic's director, confirming no such report had ever been issued. The courtroom murmured. Whispers of disbelief rippled through the benches. Monica shifted in her seat, her mask cracking. This is taken out of context. I didn't look at her. I just turned another page. Exhibit C, wire transfers from Ethan's trust to a private account under Jason's name. The account was opened 2 weeks after the funeral. Jason's face drained of color. That was a mistake. Temporary holding. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Thompson, do not speak out of turn. Mark slid a statement across the table from the bank's fraud department. Every lie they'd spun was unraveling, thread by thread. I continued, voice steady, almost detached. They told me they wanted to protect Ethan's legacy. But what they really wanted was control. Money. Power. Even his memory wasn't sacred to them. The judge turned to my mother. Mrs. Callahan, do you have any explanation for your involvement? Her lips trembled. I only wanted to help my daughter. She wasn't thinking clearly. I looked directly at her for the first time. You celebrated during his funeral, Mother. You called that healing. The courtroom fell utterly silent. Even the hum of the ceiling lights seemed to fade. Her tears came then, quick and shallow. But I didn't feel satisfaction. Just emptiness. Justice doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes, it feels like mourning what could never be mended. Mark approached the bench with the final document. Your Honor, this is a verified email exchange between Monica and Jason, obtained under subpoena. It outlines their intent to fabricate medical evidence and transfer control of the trust. The judge read quietly, lips pressed into a thin line. Then, he set the papers down. This is fraud, and it will be treated as such. Time seemed to slow. The words echoed through the chamber. Monica's breath hitched. Jason cursed under his breath. My mother's hands shook, clutching her rosary until the beads snapped, scattering like tiny confessions across the floor. The judge continued, voice stern and final. Effective immediately, the trust will remain under Mrs. Parker's control. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, given the evidence of falsification and misappropriation, this court orders an immediate freeze on the petitioner's personal accounts pending investigation. The gavel struck once, sharp, decisive. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. Mark's hand brushed my shoulder briefly. Quiet reassurance, not victory. Across the room, Monica's composure collapsed. You can't do this to us. We're family, she shouted, rising to her feet. I turned toward her, voice calm, but heavy with the truth. Family doesn't steal from a child's grave. Jason muttered something under his breath, defiant even in ruin. But when the bailiff moved toward them, he stepped back, defiance melting into fear. My mother didn't speak. She just stared at me, eyes hollow, as if realizing too late that the daughter she once belittled had finally become something she couldn't control. I gathered my folder, each document a monument to the pain they'd caused. When I turned to leave, I paused. One last glance at the people who had once shared my blood, my table, my home. You celebrated my child's death, I said quietly, my voice steady, but breaking at the edges. Today, I mourn what's left of you. Then I walked out. The rain had started again, light and steady, washing over the courthouse steps like a benediction. Mark followed, silent beside me. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. For the first time in months, I breathed without trembling. The sky above was gray, but it felt clean, as if the storm had finally done its work. Behind me, the doors closed on everything I'd lost and everything I'd reclaimed. Ethan's locket was warm against my skin. I touched it, whispering into the quiet rain. "We did it, baby. They'll never touch you again." The city moved on around me. Cars, footsteps, the pulse of life. But for me, time slowed, every sound muted by a quiet sense of justice. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was peace, the kind that comes when you've faced the fire and walked out whole. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The reckoning had come and gone. The masks were gone, the lies undone. And in their place, truth, heavy, unflinching, and finally mine. The courtroom was long behind her now, yet the echo of that gavel still lingered in Claire's mind, sharp, final, and oddly soothing. It was the sound of something ending and something else beginning. Outside, the world continued like nothing had happened. Cars passed.
People laughed.
The city breathed on, indifferent to the ruins of one family's deceit. But for Claire, the silence after the storm was sacred. Her mother's name flashed across headlines that morning. Local businesswoman accused of fraud in family trust scandal. Her sister's social accounts were gone, wiped clean of the curated smiles and filtered vacations. The brother-in-law who once sneered that Claire would never amount to anything, now faced charges of conspiracy and perjury. Justice had not come with thunder. It came quietly, with paper trails, recorded whispers, and the truth laid bare. Claire didn't attend the sentencing hearing.
She didn't need to.
She had already seen the real punishment in their eyes that day in court, that moment when masks cracked and shame replaced arrogance. A week later, she sat alone in Ethan's room. The sunlight filtered through half-drawn curtains, casting soft stripes across his favorite blanket, the one with the tiny rockets and stars. His laughter still lived there somehow, in the folds of fabric, in the air itself. She traced a finger along the edge of his photo frame. He was smiling in that picture, missing a tooth, holding his little model plane high like a victory flag. "Your world was small, baby," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. "But your heart was the biggest thing in mine." It wasn't the trust fund that mattered anymore. It was what she could do with it, what he would have wanted her to do. So she called Mark. Together, they set up the Ethan Foundation, a small charity supporting children fighting rare illnesses. No press release, no speeches, just quiet good done in his name. When the first check cleared, she signed it with a single line. "For those who still have time, from one who lost hers." Days passed gently after that. The house no longer felt haunted, not by grief, not by betrayal. There was still sadness, but it was clean now, like rain that washes rather than drowns. One afternoon, Claire stood in the garden. The same garden where her sister once mocked her, dreams of independence. The roses were blooming again, deep red, almost defiant. Mark arrived with coffee and a hesitant smile. "You could have asked for vengeance, you know," he said softly. "The law would have given it." She shook her head. "I didn't want vengeance, Mark. I wanted peace." He nodded, understanding her in the quiet way only old love does. No promises, no apologies. Just shared silence. At dusk, she drove to the cemetery. The road was empty, the sky painted in fading amber and violet. She parked by the hill where Ethan's small headstone stood beneath a maple tree. She walked slowly, carrying a single white lily. The wind played with her hair, brushing strands across her face, as if the world itself was welcoming her home. Kneeling by his grave, she placed the flower on the grass and smiled faintly. "You can rest now," she whispered. "It's over." The words weren't heavy anymore. They floated, light, freeing, almost like prayer. She stayed there for a long time, watching the horizon shift from gold to pale blue, then to quiet gray. Somewhere in the distance, a child's laughter echoed faintly, or maybe it was just the wind catching memory. Claire closed her eyes. For the first time in years, her chest didn't ache. Later, as she walked back to her car, she glanced up. The first star of the evening glimmered above the tree line. Ethan used to believe that stars were the night's way of keeping wishes safe. So she made one. Not for revenge. Not even for happiness. But for peace, the kind that doesn't demand forgetting, only forgiving. Behind her, the world that once betrayed her was busy breaking itself apart. Frozen assets. Public trials. People scrambling to rewrite their stories. She didn't care anymore. Their names would fade. The truth would remain. Ahead, a quiet life awaited, one built not on anger, but on what Ethan had taught her all along: love, endurance, and light even in the darkest corners. As she started the engine, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the grieving mother or the broken daughter anymore. She was something stronger, tempered by pain, refined by truth. Her eyes softened as she whispered, barely audible, "Justice isn't loud. It just lasts." And as she drove away, the morning sun finally broke through the clouds, painting the road ahead in gold. Claire didn't look back.
She didn't need to.
The past was buried, and peace, at last, had risen. When the noise fades, the courtroom whispers, the lies, the endless ache of loss, what remains is the truth you were too afraid to face. Grief is not a storm that passes. It's the sea you learn to swim in. I used to think grief was my punishment for loving too much, for trusting too blindly, for believing that family meant safety. But now I see it differently. Grief is not the end of love. It's what's left when love has nowhere else to go. When Ethan died, I thought I'd lost everything. My home felt like a grave. My family, the ones who should have held me up, became strangers wearing familiar faces. Their words were soft, but their eyes were sharp. Every condolence hid calculation. Every hug smelled like guilt. And yet, I stayed silent. I smiled. I told myself they're hurting too. But pain does not excuse cruelty. Grief may strip you bare, but it also shows you who can stand in the storm with you, and who only ever stood in your shadow. Looking back, I understand now. Their greed didn't destroy me. It revealed them. They wanted Ethan's trust fund, money meant for his future, for his dreams. They told themselves it was for the family, as if betrayal could ever be dressed in good intentions. But greed always shows its reflection in the smallest cracks: a smirk too quick, a whisper too low, a lie told one time too many. I once thought revenge would make the pain stop. That if I could expose them, humiliate them, hurt them back, maybe I could breathe again. But when the day came, when truth finally burned through their lies, I didn't feel triumph. I felt quiet. Revenge didn't bring my son back. It didn't fill the empty chair at the kitchen table or the silence in his room. But it gave me something else, something I didn't know I'd lost. It gave me back my voice. Grief teaches you what strength truly is. It's not in shouting or breaking things. It's in standing tall when everyone expects you to fall. It's in choosing dignity over despair, truth over noise, peace over vengeance. People think justice is loud, that it's gavel strikes and handcuffs and tears. But real justice? It's quiet. It's the stillness after the storm, when you finally realize you don't need to prove anything anymore. I don't hate them now. Hate keeps you chained to the ones who hurt you. I simply let them go, like releasing ghosts that no longer deserve to haunt me. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to let their darkness define your light. I sometimes visit Ethan's grave at sunset. I bring a single white lily and I talk to him, not about what happened, but about what I've learned. I tell him that the world can be cruel, but it can also be kind. That love can survive even after it's broken. That peace isn't found in punishing others, but in healing yourself. And I tell him that his mother finally stopped asking why me, and started saying thank you. Thank you for the pain that sharpened my eyes. Thank you for the silence that taught me strength. Thank you for the truth that set me free. If there's one thing grief has taught me, it's this. You don't rise by erasing the hurt. You rise by carrying it with grace. The people who walk away during your darkest hour are not your loss. They are your revelation. And those who stay, even in spirit, even in memory, are your reason to keep walking. I used to chase happiness, as if it were something to win. Now I understand it's something to build, one small, quiet choice at a time. So I choose peace. I choose light. And I choose to keep Ethan's love alive in every act of kindness that bears his name. The past will always echo, but I no longer live in its sound. Because in the end, grief didn't break me. It rebuilt me, stronger, softer, and finally free. Some stories don't end with a smile. They end with silence, the kind that follows truth when it's finally spoken aloud. Claire's journey wasn't just about betrayal. It was about seeing the faces she once trusted and realizing they wore masks all along. They smiled at her child's funeral, laughed while she shattered inside, and then reached for what wasn't theirs, believing she was too broken to fight back. But she did. She stood against the people who called themselves family, against the ones who turned grief into opportunity. She fought not with anger, but with truth. And in the end, it was their own lies that undid them. Her story reminds us that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it sits at your dinner table, speaks softly, and calls you family. When you think of family party during my child's funeral then demanded his trust fund money, it's no longer just a title. It's a mirror, a warning, a symbol of what happens when love turns to greed and silence turns to power. Claire's strength didn't come from revenge alone. It came from reclaiming her voice, from saying, "You took my peace, but you won't take my truth." Every scar has a story. Some are carved by others, some by life itself. But the beauty isn't in how deep they run, it's in how we choose to heal from them. Claire's scars tell a story of loss, yes, but also of courage, justice, and rebirth. She learned that healing isn't about erasing pain, it's about transforming it into purpose. So maybe the real revenge isn't in watching those who wronged us fall, but in standing taller than they ever expected us to rise. Now, I'll ask you something. If your own family betrayed you like this, what would you do? Would you stay silent? Or would you fight for your truth? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell your story. Because sometimes, speaking your truth helps someone else find theirs. And if Claire's journey moved you, if her strength, her pain, her quiet justice resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Stories of betrayal, truth, and the resilience of the human spirit. Hit that bell so you never miss the next tale of how love and loss shape who we become. Because here, every story matters. Every wound tells the truth. And every scar has a story.